Hi friends, today we're going to talk about a man who I can challenge most of you don't even know the name of, but I also promise you that almost every one of you have used his arguments in your debates, discussions, etc. It is impossible you have not done so. And the event, which is one of the most seminal events in world history. Now, the French Revolution, a few years back, a Chinese diplomat was asked, what do you think were the effects of the French Revolution? And he said, it's too early to tell. 200 years after the French Revolution. Okay. But most interesting to me is one of the most amazing characters that I have read in world history, called Maxmillien Robespierre. He was not just a guru to almost every modern dictator, from Hitler, Stalin, etc. But as I just mentioned, his views have shaped all of our views without even us knowing it. So let's quickly get down to first the event. But at the end of this video, I would like some of you to comment whether you think Robespierre was a good guy, a bad guy, or a both. Okay. Now, as you know, that most historians agree that the modern world started with the French Revolution in 1789. In 1776, America had become independent and democratic, but the 13 colonies of America at that time were much smaller in size, and it was a new world, it was a new continent, so that did not have the kind of ripple effect that France, in the middle of continental Europe, when it turned to democracy, throwing the monarchy, throwing the dynastic rule, effect that it had. What had happened was, when America was fighting for its independence, the French king Louis XVI was having a ball of a time, whistling and clapping and of course supporting, funding everything, because France had lost out in the colonial battle against Britain, and all the colonies had mostly gone to Britain. So France was loving it when America was declaring its independence. Little did he realize that those same ideas would very soon come to France. In fact, in 1784, the Statue of Liberty was gifted by the French to the American Republic to celebrate their independence. Yes, the same Statue of Liberty that now is a part of the New York Harbor. But a few years only later, in 1789, revolution broke out in France. Many events happened, including all women's march to Versailles, where the royal court was, and the main event, which was the surrounding by the public of that famous jail called the Bastille jail. Okay, and the people breaking into it and liberating the prisoners, which France today also celebrates as Bastille Day, or it's, you can say, Independence Day. The royal court and the king and his family was captured, and they were put to jail, they were tried. France was declared a democracy. One of the most prominent leaders of this movement was a young, very educated man called Maxmillien Robespierre. He was called Robespierre the Incorruptible, as in everybody believed and knew that he did not want anything for himself, he could not be corrupted. He was predominantly focused on giving power to the poorest of poor, not just in France, but he believed that the time had come for democracy worldwide. He was against the privileged classes and against royalty of every kind. He had a huge role to play in all these new ideas of liberty, fraternity, equality, etc., etc., and laying down laws for a new democratic way of life. In that manner, many of his ideas have percolated into modern democracies. But what happened was, the moment France became democratic, all the other major powers, Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia, were very worried for two things. One, if they let France try a king and royal family, and even probably kill them. That would set a very wrong precedent. Secondly, what if this fire would reach their own countries? So all of them started working towards crushing this nascent revolution. Okay, and France was attacked on all sides. Initially the French won, then there were some reverses, and in this crisis people like Robespierre and his Jacobin club became even more powerful. Robespierre then unleashed what is called the Reign of Terror, okay, where anybody and everybody who was believed to be enemy of the people, whether for no other reason but by a choice of luck, they had been part of the aristocratic setup, or people who were hoarding food, etc., or people who were hiding stuff from the common man, anybody who was suspected to even have views which differed with the revolution was called anti-national. Anybody and everybody who was believed to have been sympathetic to the earlier king was labeled anti-national. Okay, and Robespierre himself was responsible for hundreds and hundreds of such people to be tried, and a very famous way of killing became very popular in France, which is called the guillotine, where the person would put his head and something like an axe would fall from few feet away and chop off the head. So many were guillotined. Even many who were part of the revolution were guillotined later, because people had got suspicion, or Robespierre and his inner circle was suspicious of them. That sent fear down the hearts of many people and created a chaos in history, or at that point of time many believed that it was needed. This nascent republic was surrounded on all sides, and there were many who were acting against the common man, who could not fathom that the common man had gotten power. In this context, Robespierre has a very famous speech, out of which one line is that virtue without terror is useless. Now you can understand. You see, earlier there were kings, and anybody who opposed the king in person could be tried, because the country was based on a king, right? Also, there have been religious wars in history. So if you were not from a particular faith, you were killed in many of these wars. But this was the first modern democracy, and people were being killed because they oppose a certain social idea. Now you understand. See what happened during the Nazi regime. If you do not believe in the Nazi regime, you were tried or killed, etc. Similarly with the Stalin and his communist purges, the suspicion that if you were not supporting the communist regime, or even if the people in power believed you were against them, you were killed. Later in the Cold War, both sides, capitalists and communists, can be accused of doing the same in their countries and in other countries across the world. The communists probably to more extent, but both did it. And it still continues in countries. Robespierre was the first time that people were questioned of their nationalism based on ideological beliefs. Okay, and it carries on to this date. But as I mentioned, people give the justification that what else was he supposed to do in a very nascent republic, surrounded on all sides and with the concept of democracy very fledgling. Had Robespierre been a weak-hearted person, democracy would have been crushed in its beginning, and who knows how long it would have taken for democracy to come back. With this, I leave you with the open thought to tell me, what do you think of the man? Of course, let me tell you, Robespierre fell into his own ditch. Just like he tried many others, after a point, others got wary of him, they surrounded him, he was also called an anti-national, and he and his coterie was also killed by the same. That was the end of Robespierre and the end of the so-called Reign of Terror. and of course after that, little while later, a young French soldier called Napoleon and some other people came to power, and finally, while the revolution lived on, Napoleon had to take full power and become kind of a, you can say, dictator. Okay, but we will talk about Napoleon in another video. Let this be about Maxmillien Robespierre, and I will wait for your comments on this event. I hope we can learn something more exciting from these world history, you can say, personalities and what they mean to us. Thanks. Bye.